Welcome to the Really Know Your Customer podcast with your hosts, Betsy Westhafer and Tony Bodo. Join Betsy and Tony as they dive in with highly successful C-suite leaders who have grown successful organizations by creating a laser focus on listening to their customers and building deep customer relationships. Now, it's time to join Betsy and Tony for the Really Know Your Customer show.
Welcome to another episode of the Really Know Your Customer podcast. I'm Tony Bodo, CEO of Tony Bodo International.
And I'm Betsy Westhafer, CEO of the Congruity Group. We're very glad to have you here today.
Absolutely. And I got to tell you, Betsy, I am so excited for our audience to be able to hear from our guest, Nicole Glenn, today, because she is a badass. She is a powerhouse. She's an amazing woman in the logistics industry. And I'll let you do the intro, but I am so excited because a couple of things that really stood out to me in this is she talks about understanding the customer's expectations. Like, what is it they really need to know? And down to the detail level of who needs to know what, how often. And if you talk about really knowing your customer, if you know the answers to those questions, who needs to know what, how often, you are going to have an amazing business if you deliver upon that.
And taking that a step forward, who needs to know what and what is their preferred method of communication? Is it an email?
Yes,
is it
good.
a text? Is it
very
a phone
good.
call? And I just think that just takes it to such a great level. So for our listeners, Nicole is the CEO of Candor Expedite. They have a very niche business with regard to logistics, and she'll go into, who those customers are, what problems they solve for them. Really fascinating conversation. But what really struck me was she just shines as a leader. And so we did talk a lot about some really cool things she's doing as a leader of a company. She's growing very, very fast. The company was started in 2017, and she's growing very rapidly. And it's just really exciting to talk to somebody that is an entrepreneur, passionate about what they do, leadership skills that are off the charts. So we should probably just go ahead and jump in, Tony. Nicole, thank you so much. We are so excited to have you here and just can't wait to jump into this conversation. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm so excited to be here too. I think this is going to be a great discussion.
Well, we're just going to jump right in. Why don't we start with you just kind of giving us a little bit of your background, kind of your journey to how you got to where you are right now. Tell us a little bit about your personal journey, where you grew up, where you went to school. Just kind of give us the bio of Nicole.
For sure. So hi, everybody. My name is Nicole Glenn. I'm the owner of Candor Expedite. And obviously, I've been in transportation. I've talked to many different people about this topic to say it's over 20 years now. But I started off living in Illinois. So I was one of three children to my parents. I lived in Naperville and always had that work ethic mindset. So my parents instilled that in me. They were always, going to work. I don't ever really remember sick days where they were at home. The only thing my mom would do is if it snowed, because we lived in Chicago, she made that rule with her employer. But other than that, I was so used to my parents always going to work and really giving all that they could to their careers to provide for us. So in learning that, I started very young with working. So I was that kid at 16 that over summer breaks had 2 jobs. I started my own little babysitting service, paid for my first car that way, and was kind of on my own. My parents, after we started working, they were like, well, if you want that, you have to work for it. So I started getting that little taste of independence, and learning and applying myself. So I was even that student that would leave at like 10:30 in the morning, their junior and senior year of high school, and had a work remote kind of visa that I was able to go to, leave school and go to work. And so I had 2 jobs at high school. So I was one of those crazy people. But then I went on to working in logistics. I was working retail. I met this man. He came inside and asked me a question, and I remembered the answer pretty quickly. So he's like, "Do you want to work in freight?" And I was like, "What is that?" because freight wasn't what it is today, right? We always hear different things about supply chain and degrees now. And it seems to be a very kind of hip place for people to come now. It seems like a lot of younger people are interested in it because it's so chaotic and moving. And when I joined, it was, to be honest, a lot of just old guys. So I was always the youngest one, the only female for a while, and really learned to love logistics. So stayed in it. I left for a little bit. I had my daughter. I left for 3 years. I stayed home with her and did a little part-time nannying. And then, of course, someone called and said, hey, we have this opening. Would you like to come back? And so I jumped back into logistics on the sales side when my background had always been operations. I dealt with owner operators, a little bit of customer sale, but it was mostly ops. So then I jumped into my first sales role and I totally loved it. So I stayed there at that company and grew within my career for about almost 9 years, and eventually became president of the company. Loved it, loved everything about it, loved people. So on my sales journey, I got to a point where I found out I can only go so far. Your operations team, when they need assistance and need more people, they can only go so far with it. And everyone was working so hard. So I did take the step into more of a leadership side. Begrudgingly, I was concerned that I wouldn't do very well at it, because when you're in sales, you're taught to be greedy and for yourself and go get revenue and make commission. And so this was a totally different side of the world for me, and fell in love with it. And I loved running a company and working hand in hand with another business owner. So I got to a point where I really wanted to take that next step and be a business owner myself. I never felt ready. It was one of those things where I was very transparent with the gentleman I worked for, telling him that I would love to have stake in the company and be a part of that ownership path. But it just didn't work out. Companies are set certain ways. And so it was time for me to take that jump. And I did. I went and worked somewhere else for a little bit. And it was that last little push, for an entrepreneur to go, this is time. It's time for me to take this leap. And so I did. And I started Candor Expedite. So I told you about 20 years in about 12 seconds, but 2017 was the year that I made the jump and started my own company. And here we are 4 years later, loving it.
Oh, what a great story. And I especially love the part just about how it starts really with how you were raised by your parents and the work ethic and, moving into leadership, even though you didn't feel ready. Love that. So tell us about the business. Tell us about, it's a unique business, a very niche business, as we talked about in our little prep session. So tell us about what is unique about Candor Expedite, and tell us about your customers, the problems you solve for them, how you go about that, and just your general culture of customer centricity.
Sure. So my background has been in expedite. On the sales side, and then developed a truckload brokerage side of things, had assets before, built a fleet. And so when I wanted to start my own company, I was like, what is it that I love the most? What is it that I feel has the biggest need, in the industry? And I decided to just stay with that expedited side and really drop everything off. It was great learning all of those things and being a part of many different modes, but I worked with a company that had a great product. And so I'm like, I would love to, expand on that and really focus to disrupt our industry on what service communication and really what customers should start expecting. It shouldn't be a little add-on feature of true service and communication. It should be what they get on every single shipment, regardless if it's expedite or just an LTL shipment. So we started developing a service that was really around that, and listening to our customers and understanding what it is that they wanted. And a lot of times when you're talking about time-sensitive shipments, it's really needing that. It's giving our customers that issue that they have with time. So I would say that's our biggest solve sure, yes, we handle those time sensitive shipments, but we try to take over of a shipment, try to get to learn the customer and those needs and expectations and just deliver on that. So they get that time back. They don't have to chase a shipment. They don't have to constantly ask like, where is this? Or play that telephone game. You guys would think that, where we are in this day and age with technology, that telephone game would be gone, right? And it's not. It's still a big issue where you'll pick up the phone and you'll hear someone say, hey, can I get an update on this? And there's really 15, sometimes 20 people behind the scenes on an expedited shipment that need to know where it is. So giving that time back, saying, hey, right up front, setting those expectations for our clients and going, what is it that you particularly need? How do we tailor this for you? Who needs to know this information? How often do you need to know this information? Because shippers, I love to tell my team this, and I say it over and over again, our clients, our shipping clients, we are just 1/10 of their jobs. I don't think the world realizes what their jobs look like. Getting product out to their customer is just a sliver of dealing with their customer service teams, dealing with reporting, making sure that production's on schedule. So just that little truck showing up and getting moving is not the end all be all for a manufacturer. And so bringing that to light and letting a customer know, like, we got you. Please go on to what it is that you're supposed to do. Go make sure that your production's running on schedule, get all of these things aligned, and let's save you that time.
I find it really fascinating. So there's a couple of things, and I'll jump back into these as we go through the interview here. But one of them you just said was setting expectations, who needs to know how often. And that to me really intrigues me, because as I'm sitting here listening to you, logistics, as you said, way back when you started was much different than it is today. And today, logistics is really about information flow more than anything else. That's my takeaway from it. It's like, I remember my MBA program back in like 2002, we were studying Walmart's just-in-time concept, and with all of that, they really pushed this idea of information flow. And now you're saying you're taking it to this next level of how do we know exactly what information to provide to whom, when, and doing it in a way that they feel service. It's not just about providing the information, but doing it in the right way. So talk a little bit more about that. Like, what do you see? And I think there may be even an element of pre-COVID, post-COVID, if you will.
Sure.
But tell us a little bit about what you see that customers are really expecting today versus what they expected in the past, not just in information, but also the quality of that experience.
I think that's what differentiates companies is the quality of that experience. I think having that, I always call it the ninja button, right? Everybody wants to have that ninja button in life. And when you're working and you are paying for a service, I feel like you should be able to get that. You should be able to tap that button, and everything's been discussed in advance, where, it's kind of like when you're calling a contractor to come work on your house, you've expressed to them what it is that you would like for them to do, and then what do? They take all the paneling off the walls, they remove the kitchen sink, and then they start noticing that there's some issues, right? And so we as homeowners don't understand, okay, that's broken, just fix it. What is that going to cost? How does this work? It's the same thing. It's the same thing on the shipper side. Like I said, their job is to more focus on getting that product out, but getting it produced, getting all of that information for their customers and servicing it that way. So we have that same expectation when we do anything in life. It should be the same thing when we're talking to our clients and dealing with our clients. We are those subject matter experts. And so we should be educating them, but within reason. It's like, what do they really need to know? All they really need to know is it's broken. Here's how I can fix it. And here's how you can look good. Here's how we can get your customer to be happy with you, your boss, whatever the case is, and just handle that and give you that time back. And it's crazy. We get testimonials from some of our clients. And we had one that said, I've been in global supply chain for 40 years and I've never seen anything like this. And of course, my whole team, we want to raise and wave this flag like, we're awesome. Look what we did, like we're celebrating. But at the same time, I didn't say this to them, but it's like sad to me that customers, just from getting communication and transparency, it was the best thing that they've ever had, and if you would think that that would be more of the norm in any industry. And that's the same thing that I'm seeing as a company owner, and I deal with vendors. I'm making sure too. I'm like, wow, I can't believe some of the service and the lack of service that I get. And so it's just this cycle of learning, on how to really fulfill a need for a client, but then also even being a vendor myself, or people asking, or my vendors, I should say, even if it's not on the logistics side, setting that expectation of what I'm expecting as them as their client, And so doing that, knowing that, we're able to go to our customers and go, what about this? And what do you need with that? And how does that work? So that way things can just flow smooth and seamlessly. And I think as we continually go and technology becomes part of that, people are really going to start developing tech to have those little extra bells and whistles, so-and-so needs to know there's going to be buttons on a screen here. And we're trying to actually develop that to where it's like, John wants to know every 2 hours, but then Karen on his team wants a text message to say this. And how do we develop those things? And if you can think of it nowadays with tech, it's coming, but then also making sure that we're keeping that human element to things, right? I feel like we're, a lot of industries are trying to just focus on tech and take the human side out of it. But the world works on relationships. And so you need to make sure that people are there, making sure that everything's running smooth, and just continually being that extra little level of the ninja button for people.
Nicole, I know that you have clients that have special circumstances where they need something expedited. So can you give us some examples of why they would call Candor versus, another company? And then when that, are there certain industries that seem to be particularly attracted to the type of service that you deliver?
There are. There's obviously a lot of just-in-time industries. So automotive is one of those, right? So they're running those production lines. A lot of food companies too need product brought out to their clients or products rushed in for production. But we service a lot of aerospace clients, a lot of medical type companies, whether that's devices. Even respirators we delivered during COVID into New York City. But then there's also this level of, I always call it the non-expedite expedite. And what I mean by that is we're in this really tight time right now in the industry with capacity. And so when things are loose and there's a lot of trucks and capacity, customers want that ninja button. Again, they just have a TMS that does some routing, and they may have 2 skids, but hey, I need to still get this to my client and I can't LTL it. And so they would just put it on a full truck, and ship it out, and it just everyday business. Well, now with capacity getting tighter and rates are just sometimes in certain markets very insane, we're trying to show our customers 2 things, is that they can utilize tailored equipment. And I think as supply chain keeps getting smarter and budgets keep getting hopefully smaller for some people, they are able to start looking at some of these different things to go, hey, really, what's the best mode on moving this freight there? I could move it with additional freight and take the chance for damage. I could just let it run, on a full truckload and not reap the rewards of those savings. But then also that carbon footprint, where you should be focusing on that these days, and making sure that you are doing all that we can as really everybody giving that contribution back towards our earth. So I think I'm kind of going a little bit out of scope here, but what I'm trying to say is we have some clients that we're doing that education piece on to say there are other options for you besides a 53-foot truck. If you have a couple of boxes, we can have a driver hand load that product, and you're getting creme de la creme service at a fraction of the cost of a tractor trailer. So it's getting more people interested because, people are changing in their roles. Like I said, they're stepping into new supply chain spots where they have to get crafty and creative to cut cost. And so that's what we're trying to help them do as well.
I think that's really interesting because what you're talking about, I'm going to pull this out for the listener, just so they really reflect on this. You're really getting in there and understanding what the customer really needs, and then looking at what are the options that we can use to provide the best level of service to exceed their expectations, under budget, if possible. And you've got all these considerations out there that they're thinking about, how do I get my product to the customer? And you're able to stop and look at all these other possibilities and say, hey, you could do it this way, this way, this way, and give these different options. And I find it really fascinating because, when I see a semi driving down the highway, I don't think about all the stuff that goes in the back end of, literally in the back end of that. How does it get there?
Yeah.
What's the process, right? And then, every day I'm in my neighborhood here, I work from my home, and I see the FedEx, I see UPS, I see Amazon, and there's probably some other private expedite companies that come through here as well and deliver stuff. So we don't think about it as consumers, how much there is going on in the back end and how many hands and how many humans have to touch something. Oh, yeah. So I find it really fascinating, and talk about this tailored equipment. I'm kind of intrigued by this because as we look into the future, I know they're working on electric trucks, trying to reduce carbon footprint and all that, but if they can use vans, if they can use smaller equipment to get things places, it just seems to make a lot more sense that the cost of the human driver, is probably a small fraction of the whole cost, I would guess.
Yeah.
But even that's going to go away as we get to self-driving vehicles.
Yeah.
So kind of what do you see there? That's a little futuristic, but what do you see?
Oh, I mean, it's definitely going to come, and rightfully so. I mean, that again is a big emphasis for what the world's trying to do. We see a problem, which is a driver shortage, and humans are going to make a solution. And that's one of them. I don't know when that's going to come. I know it will be here. I know there's so much into it already with tons of money and funding to get those things to happen. But it's not just a company can just start that. That is you're dealing with federal, crossing state law. I mean, there's so much into that. But I think as we continually move into this sector of life with tech, those things are going to start happening, whether that's just locally and then going more regional, it may be interstate to start, and then it will unfold. And again, I mean, I would think that would be something that in the next 10 years, we're going to definitely start seeing. I don't know if it's going to even be 10 years away. In the freight side too, I mean, there's a lot of technology that's doing freight matching. So our company is a freight brokerage. And you hear it's kind of like the stockbroker market. They go, is the freight brokerage market going to die? And there will be some, high different changes, turnarounds, buyouts, and a lot of just freight matching, will be happening. And that it makes sense on some things, it really does, because people cost money. So running these freight brokerages and all of that, companies are constantly learning and getting smarter and trying different things. So yeah. And that's another reason why I like the idea of the expedited side. And I didn't even make mention, but we do a lot of white glove at our company too, is bringing in that additional touch to it. So I like that niche, get your hands dirty, have a driver step in there and help unload or bring school supplies up to the 6th floor in New York City to a small school. Those are the things that, tech, of course, is going to come and it does impact, but you can't ultimately get rid of that for a long time, So it's one of those things with when you're developing and designing a company, you want to create a product that's sustainable, but yet can change. And so that's what we're trying to do, even as an expedited company, is what are those things that we can help our customers automate, help our company automate, but at the same time, to be there in the next 15 years, that is one of the most interesting pieces, I think, in what's happening in logistics today, is watching this just constant shift on what's happening and these giant disruptions, So I'm like, if I can be a disruptor with communication, we're doing something right.
I love everything about that. And when you were talking about tech, everybody knows tech moves at the speed of light. It's different every day. But I think COVID really put a light on the supply chain, and everybody's talking about how long it takes to get things. And, I just had an experience I'm sorry.
I was going to say, because it's affecting the consumer and they understand.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of interest in why is that, our favorite little restaurant in our neighborhood can't get chicken wings right now. And they've taken them off their menu, and people are like, why is that happening? And there's so much to it. And like you said, Tony, there's so many hands that go into delivering chicken wings to your plate. And so especially on the food thing, and it actually, I think, gives people pause, thinking, we've never had a problem getting what we need in this country, and so thinking about how really impactful the supply chain is all the way from start to finish. And so I think it is really interesting to watch the disruption and the problem solving and the creativity and innovation to try to mitigate everything that's going on. Nicole, if you were sitting in a coffee shop, what would you love to overhear someone saying about your company?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. Well, I mean, it's going to be what everyone wants it to be, is that we made something insanely easy, and it was one of the best experiences they've ever had. So I have, not even in a coffee shop, I did get in an email chain that I don't even know if I was supposed to be on. And they were like, see, I told you it's the best company we've worked with. And I was like, oh, I don't even know if I was supposed to see that. That's so cool.
That is awesome.
Yeah. So, I mean, it would be something like that, to know that we're really exceeding an expectation for a client it's one of the best things. When we were in Illinois, we had a love wall, so that's what I called it. And we would print out every customer comment or anything that we would get, and post them everywhere. And again, it's just so exciting for people that even work and support that to hear those wonderful things.
I think that's such a really important piece of culture, to be able to share those, however you do, whether it's the love wall. I love that idea. But, in hospitality, where I came from, they would have these daily stand-ups. And one of the things that we initiated was reading a positive review from a guest or a meeting planner that came through the hotel that prior day or the prior week. And it does so much to form the mindset of the employee and the heart too, right? The mind and heart work together in that. And so how do you, besides like those types of things, how else do you develop the culture in your company? Because this communication piece is so critical. It demands a particular type of culture. How do you really develop that and keep it moving forward?
Well, it's changed. When we first started, everybody was just in one spot. So we were all up in Illinois. Everyone was in office every day. And then we opened in Dallas. So I moved down here. So our team, I don't want to say was disconnected, but we weren't in the office every day. And so it was actually pre-COVID, thankfully, because what that did was start showing us, how do we communicate together, not all being in the same spot. And so as we started adding team members and all of that stuff started happening down in Texas, COVID did start, I guess you could say, and started impacting us to where we were all at home. But since we had already been doing that, it didn't really affect the way that we were going to business, but our team hadn't grown as much as it had today. So in 2021, we've more than doubled our team. And so with doing that, now we have team members that never knew the members that were up in Illinois, and they never seen them in person, and they never had that constant communication of like making jokes at each other's expense, lightly on Slack and like having that fun. So we have to like intentionally do it. So with the communication side on training, when we're talking about actual work and getting those processes documented and out, we've spent a ton of time creating visuals for people that they can see on how to do things from start to finish. And we put a ton of emphasis on that. So when, say, someone starts in our customer service team, and a lot of them are starting in Texas, and our customer service lead now lives in Florida. And so what we're doing is really doing everything on teams, where they spend the day together, sometimes as groups on teams, and they're talking, and that banter is going while they're working. So they'll just have, we have multiple screens. I have 4 in front of me right now. My team all have 3 or 2 or 4 in front of them. So they'll let that run. They'll talk, they'll communicate. We have happy hours that we've done a handful of times. I send out a CEO letter to my group, my whole team, I guess, every month. I did it yesterday. It's always the beginning of the month, just aligning that and telling them what the vision is and where we're headed and what did we do last month? What are we trying to do this next month? Calling out rock stars. We have a program called, I'm sorry to say it on a show, but it's the Badass program. And so I'm going to show you this. We have these little cards. They're Post-it, or they're postcards, and it's based upon our values. And so we all, as our group, made our values, and everybody acknowledges each other when they hit those company values. And so we send those in the mail. We have them virtual. And it's a way to, reward an employee of the quarter, employee of the year. And they're all close. The team has become close because of these things. And then hosting, we have our first in September, this next month. We're bringing everybody into Texas. And hopefully, with the pandemic kind of flaring back up again, we can do it. But it's to get everyone in the same area and just have a weekend of fun. So we're trying really hard, and even with, I said, moving down here and starting that office, we've hired people we have someone in Kansas, we have someone in Oklahoma now. Our truckload division started up in Michigan. We have some team members that work through lean staffing that are in Colombia, the country. And so we've kind of like spread out a little bit, but it still feels like we're really connected from that constant communication. So we have committees, people are on different committees, whether that's different departments if you're not even in sales, you may be on the sales committee, you may be on the marketing committee, you might be on the customer service committee. So that way it just brings those people together to constantly be talking about how do we do better? How do we stay connected? And how do we move this company forward with hopefully even double again with people this next year?
Sounds like such a cool place to work. I'm like ready to put my application in, Nicole.
Well, we're hiring. Join us. Yeah.
No, I love that. And that's just such a testament to your leadership to put so much time and resource behind that. And I love those badass cards. And it's okay to say that. I think we might get a little warning. I don't know. But anyway, so one of the things that we love to do on our show is talk about how our guests how our guests actually give back to the community. I know you're doing some of those things. So is there a particular organization or something that you want to shine a spotlight on, and we can put their contact information and website links, et cetera, in our show notes?
Well, at this point in time, we're still in that hunt for that perfect organization that we can help. I mean, we talk about this all the time as a group, and it's been one of the hardest things from being split on what we can do, So as far as helping our community, we've been focused more in the Dallas area. We've done turkey drives this last year, and we were able to deliver a bunch of gift cards to a church by raising money from our team to do that. And then we fund individual families for like holidays for like children to get Christmas gifts, but we haven't. So had a charity that we've all kind of come together to lift and support. And so if you guys actually have some great ones that you've heard from other guests, I would actually love to know what we could do additionally to help people, because our teams talked about it, and giving time and money to would be a great thing. We just haven't found that yet.
Yeah. And I'll connect with you offline on that. Cause we have heard of some really cool organizations, through the podcast as well. So
yeah, I started looking in to see how to actually create a non-for-profit organization. Cause I have a niece who is deaf and she has a cochlear and a hearing aid. And so my sister, she hasn't been working. So I asked her, I'm like, why don't we see what we can do on starting one? So she's starting that research so that way we can help kids get cochlear implants and the newest technology. But again, we haven't been able to.
We actually, Betsy, we have some contacts that could help her out through CEO space.
Yeah. And also my daughter-in-law is an audiologist that focuses on children. So yeah, we can definitely talk.
We're solving problems on the show. I love it.
Yeah, I know, right? Well, one last question for you, Nicole. What is something that, think about our audience that listens to our show? Is there anything that as a group we can do to support your efforts? Is there a particular company you'd like a contact in? Is there, some event that you want to know about? Anything that our listeners might be able to do to support your efforts?
Well, I think it would be more of, if there's a contact that they have in need of something that needs to move, whether that is to a home. I mean, we've moved benches into people's houses that were insanely high value, or, they hear of something that's just not working right at a different company. Please throw our name in the hat. We would love to consult a client and see if we can potentially help them.
Awesome. Tony, you got anything else?
I got one last question. I really want to ask this. And so I've got two daughters. They're almost ready to go to college. They're 16 and 17. And as I was reading your bio, I saw how you've just been this amazing force to be reckoned with as a female leader. So what are 2 or 3 tips you could give someone who is joining the workforce right now, or maybe they're already in the workforce, but they're looking for that leadership role? And I mean, you talked about one of the things I hear a lot from women, and you mentioned it in the very beginning of the podcast, is that you didn't feel ready. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I try to support my daughters and say, hey, you're never going to be ready. Just go for it. Right. What are some of the tips that you would give either a young woman or maybe a woman who's in the middle of her career wanting to do more?
It's asking. It's funny, even being a business owner, I'll see a lot of men underneath us, like, ask for that next jump in their career, ask for that raise or that promotion. And I don't see it a lot where a woman will ask. And it's one of the traits, and there's data behind this that say that females, they need to feel ready in order to do those things. I mean, you'll see men taking jobs that they're like, I don't even know how I'm going to do this, but I got it. I'm going to try it. And so it's really just kind of believing in yourself and understanding that if you're not ready, you're going to learn, and then never stop learning. That's the one thing that I would say to everybody, but females, like, if you're going to go into one of those roles and you don't feel ready or you don't feel confident, keep going out there, keep networking with different people that can help you get on a path and ask those questions and find a mentor. I think that's a really big thing too, that the younger generations don't really seem to put that same emphasis on. Find somebody that will listen to you and give you some guidance. And again, it doesn't have to be female or male. I have both that have really kind of challenged me. And there's been times that I've felt that I'm not ready, and I'll talk to a business leader and they'll go, just do it, just try it. And so I might not jump all the way in, but at the same time, it's like, I'll jump in enough to where I feel like, okay, I'm uncomfortable. So it's okay to constantly feel uncomfortable. And that's what I tell my daughter often. I'm like, you're never going to know everybody. You're never going to know everything, but just keep trying and keep asking and keep learning and keep applying yourselves and never stop.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
Oh, I have just absolutely loved this conversation, Nicole. Thank you so much for joining us. So much good information to share with our listeners. And we know you're very busy, so we greatly appreciate you taking the time to join us here today.
Thank you very much, guys. I appreciated it too.
All right. We'll see you soon, Nicole.
Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you.
Betsy, I absolutely love Nicole and I love this interview. She is just a force to be reckoned with. What really stands out to me is something she said, and I didn't even have a chance to go back to it because we ran out of time. It was such a great interview. But she talked about in the very beginning that she wanted to start this company. And she said, she asked herself two questions. What do I love the most? And what is the greatest need in the industry? And I knew when she said that we would have an amazing interview, because it's about the passion that we often talk about. And you and I as entrepreneurs, we have this passion. We do what we love. But the other part that a lot of people forget to talk about, which is what our whole show is about, is really knowing your customer. What is it your customers most need? What does your industry need? And of all things, and she even, I think, expresses her shock about how just clear, transparent communication, setting expectations and understanding the expectations and exceeding those expectations in communication in the logistics industry, of all things, that's how she's disrupting the industry. And to me, it blows my mind to think about that, because you think about, it's going to be the next advancement in trucks or in loading equipment or in the docks or whatever. And it's not that at all. It's communication. That just struck me as it reframed my perspective of the logistics industry. And we've been working in this industry for quite a while now.
Right, exactly, Tony. And the other part of that is something that seems like a no-brainer for people that are good communicators. I think we often take for granted that that's not necessarily the way the world sees it. Communication is such an important part. And I know as a customer as well, myself, when I had a situation the other day where they were supposed to deliver my refrigerator between 8 and 12. And they called and said, you know what, we don't have that in stock after all. So thankfully, I got that call right away. I mean, wildly disappointed, but I wasn't angry because they called and told me, and I'm glad they didn't just not show up and have me sitting there all day waiting for this refrigerator. They did communicate, even though they communicated bad news. They still communicated. So that was very helpful. And I just think that is such a message that needs to get out to businesses. Is all it takes is a phone call sometimes. The other thing too about what do I love the most and where's the greatest need? Those are like the two questions that every entrepreneur needs to ask themselves before they get started. And it seems so basic, but it's so, so, so important. I also just love the whole part of the conversation about how they work with a remote team and how they build that culture and how they put time and resources behind creating that culture. And I didn't ask her this. I wish I had, but I would assume that she has a phenomenal retention rate of employees in a time when the labor market's really tight because of all of that energy she puts into building that cohesive team.
Yeah, she did say that they've doubled in size this year. We're only in, as of recording this, early August. Yeah. And that's a pretty significant growth rate from an employee perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, Tony, love having these conversations. Love doing this show with you. That was another great episode. So for our listeners out there, we hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. And we'll see you next time on the Really Know Your Customer podcast.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Really Know Your Customer. We hope you gained a lot of value from being here today. If you want to learn more about the work Betsy and Tony do to help their clients thrive, visit Betsy at thecongruitygroup.com and Tony at tonybodo.com. See you next time on the Really Know Your Customer show.